Tension and uncertainty quickened the political pulse on Parliament Hill this week as MPs returned to the House of Commons facing a barrage of name-calling and insults and the constant threat of confidence votes.
High-flying, high-taxing, high-carbon hypocrite.
He wants to do nothing. He wants to hurt Canadians.
How long will the phantom finance minister endure this humiliation?
All they can do is insult people.
We need to fire this costly carbon tax coalition so we can elect a common sense government that will bring it home for them.
He wants to cut programs, make Canadians suffer, so he can sit in the big chair.
He is a fake, a phony, and a fraud. How can anyone ever believe what this sellout NDP leader says in the future?
Colleagues, we're not going to let Pierre Poilievre tell us what to do. We're not going to listen to someone who wants to cut the things that people need.
I'm propping nobody up. If they do not come with the vote I want, they will fall. And that's their decision to make.
Okay, this all comes after a tough by-election loss for the Liberals and as premiers and premiers seeking re-election try to use the Prime Minister as a political football. Our party insiders are here to take the political pulse of Parliament. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer. Melanie Richer is a former Director of Communications for the NDP. And Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. Good to see you all. Greg, return to Parliament, we kind of compare it as a back to school, but this feels more like back to the school yard. Yeah. A lot of shoving, some spitting. Catherine Cullen just told us that Talib Noor Mohammed got pushed by one of the protesters that has been stalking and harassing MPs. You wanted to focus on this. What do you make of what we're seeing in Parliament and just outside of Parliament?
Yeah, I just, Fred and Mel and I were in the hallway watching the previous interview. You know, what the name that Laurie Idlout, NDP MP, was called as well. Look, so I'm going to draw a thread here from the Yellow Vest protest in 2019 to the convoy occupation of Ottawa. A lot of the same individuals, especially with the Yellow Vest. It was a copycat of something that had gone on in France, but even the ambassador to France in Canada at the time said, there's elements of the far right in your Yellow Vest movement that we did not see.
United We Roll, I believe they called it at the time.
Yeah, and what's in common with the Yellow Vest protest and the convoy occupation is there was one political party with elected members and senators that were endorsing them, giving them coffee, donuts, posing for pictures with them. And meanwhile, the residents of Ottawa lived through, I had friends whose businesses were massively negatively impacted at a time when we were going through COVID and some places were allowed to open up. Pretty much the downtown of Ottawa didn't get to. And the behavior was pretty appalling. And I saw clips this week of the protesters, the perma protest that has stayed here. I don't know if they're retired individuals, independently wealthy, but they seem to have an entirely large amount of time to sit there and harass members of Parliament. And at the same time, we can't not notice what's going on in the United States. Today, there was a story about the Secret Service not having enough resources to be able to protect who they're designed to protect. And I'll just finish the video with this. The video showing the people harassing Jagmeet Singh. There's a big tell there because on tape you hear the individual say the insult. And when Jagmeet Singh challenges him on that, he folds like a cheap suit. Like we're told that bullies do. You stand up to them, and this is what will happen. I watched your panel that night. I disagree with the Liberal and the Conservative that night, where they were saying that Singh needs to take the high road. I will give him this. He has taken the high road numerous times.
Yeah, eventually you run out of road.
Yeah, right? I'm not sure I agree with things that happened in the House later that week, but in that, I thought he was entirely justified. And it's also really, and Charlie Angus talked about this, you see the members of the Parliamentary Police Service standing there and doing nothing. We had a shooting on Parliament Hill, I believe it's 10 years ago that we're coming up on, and we had to rejig the entire security service around the hill as because of that. I think there are some questions to be answered around that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Singh went back to the protester, and it could have escalated. That's what I thought, right? That it could have really turned physical. You know, I don't blame the guy for having that reaction. I mean, there's only so much of that you can eat. But, you know, Fred, Greg just made the point, there's one party out bringing donuts, you know, and supporting, talking about the Conservatives, though the People's Party of Canada were there, though they're not elected. And Singh laid this at Pierre Poilievre's feet after it happened. He goes, this is the Canada Pierre Poilievre wants, and things got really nasty in Parliament between those two. What do you make of that?
Right, just to back up a bit, the convoy was something that happened, and it was an interesting thing that happened when it was on its way to Ottawa. We saw some Conservative politicians getting engaged and involved in it. I don't know how long that stayed once they were here and once they didn't go away for a long time. But at the same time, this group that is now around Parliament, that's roaming around, it seems like a very unhinged, different group. Not that the other one wasn't unhinged, but this seems like a weird thing that's just sticking around. And I thought, when I saw that video of Jagmeet Singh approach and the way he turned and went back and called them on, I thought he looked great. I thought that was, he looked strong and like putting his foot down. He didn't know he was being recorded. We don't know who was recording as far as I know. And it was just, I thought he looked really good. And then it went all downhill from Singh after that. The next day, he tried to get political points on it by putting out this weird tweet by attacking Poilievre on it. And then in the House yesterday, he walked into the aisle and pointed fingers at Poilievre and flexed and basically challenged him to a fight, an actual physical fight.
Well, the NDP would say, he said, I'm right here, bro, as in say it to my face, because Poilievre was using the Speaker and the Prime Minister to attack Singh. And Singh was like, talk to me,
Which is how Parliament works.
Sure, well, yes, but you're not supposed to ask the NDP leader questions unless he's the Prime Minister.
No, but you can make comments about him. And when he walks into the aisle and says, I'm right here, and points at him, I think Singh went too far with that. And I think he's trying to milk too much of what happened. I thought he had a good day, and I think he ruined it by going too far.
Mel, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, when I was watching the video, and it's not funny, but interesting that you bring up the yellow vest, because folks will remember that a few years ago, Jagmeet was kind of followed and harassed by folks at the time and threatened. I think the video ends with somebody saying, you know, the next time we see each other, we're going to tango. And Jagmeet just keeps walking. And funny enough, I worked with Jagmeet at the time, and I was with him all day, and he never told me that that had happened. I ended up getting a video from a journalist saying, hey, can you send me a comment on this viral video? And I said, what video? She sent me the video. I was standing in the lobby with Jagmeet. I got really emotional because I was scared for my friend. And when I talked to him about it, his reaction was, it's okay, Riche. I'm okay. I can defend myself. This is somebody who needs care. This is somebody who needs mental health support, not, you know, a call from the cops to intervene. And I think what's different between that interaction and what we saw on Tuesday is, you know, Jagmeet isn't worried about defending himself. He knows he's okay. And I think what we saw this week is after the interrupting the Terry Fox Memorial, after, you know, what we heard that they called MP that was, I'm no longer speaking on behalf of myself. I am now speaking on behalf of others, and I'm standing up to you because I'm saying this ain't cool, this isn't okay. And I think for the most part, at least in my universe, it was like a sigh of, okay, somebody is saying, this isn't our Canada, this isn't what we're going to do anymore, we're done. You've had your moment to complain, you've had your moment to say this, it's over. And you know what, I think Jagmeet is a good fighter. Did he go maybe a little bit too fighter later in this week? You know, I'll let others weigh in on that, but this is somebody who has had to stand up to bullies his whole life. If you've read his book, you've seen that, whether it be folks who are racist, whether it be, you know, standing up for his siblings at home. This is somebody who takes that on, not when he's attacked, not when people are making comments about him, but really to stand up for others. And I think that's what we saw this week.
But, you know, Mel, you use that phrase, this isn't our Canada. Isn't it, though? I mean, the Americans keep saying that every time there's a mass shooting. They say, this isn't us. But you know what? It is. Yeah. It is baked in. And increasingly, this is baked in, you know, to our politics and the way our public figures have to watch out for.
I think to a certain degree, but I think the vast majority of people don't like this. I think the vast majority of people, and I think we saw that, you know, during times of vaccine and vaccine mandates too, the vast majority of people got vaccines. The vast majority of people were on board with what the government was asking us to do, what health experts were asking us to do. And I think, again, you know, it didn't matter if you were partisan or where you stood in at least my group of friends. It was like, finally somebody is saying, enough. You've had your time, move on. So I think the vast majority of Canadians, even though this is permeating, I hear you, I think the vast majority of people are over it, are done.
Can I just say it's fascinating? Some of the biggest critics of mask mandates and vaccine mandates are some of the biggest supporters of forced care for people with drug addictions, right? So that medical freedom is a convenient sort of argument
And of course,
as it comes in.
the right to choose, like abortion, like also, it's just,
But so Greg, like, tie all of this stuff into what's happening inside the House, right? There hasn't been any real policy conversations or anything to do with the business of government in question period today. It has been a string of ad hominems and insults and then fundraising emails, following up, calling people liars and trying to raise money on it. There's a constant belittling of anyone who disagrees with each other and an attack on their opinions. We saw Mr. Poilievre on Twitter going after CTV today because Bell Media has some financial problems, had a credit rating downgrade. So this is why CTV is attacking me all the time. What the heck's going on, man? There's an alternate reality evolving here.
If you were to follow Canadian politics for the last year and not ever see a poll, you would assume that the Conservatives are the most desperate, because they're flinging everything at the wall to see what will stick. And a lot of it's mean and nasty. Now, it's not new. I encourage folks to read John Getty's piece in Maclean's in 2013, where he talked about the Conservative ads that were attacking Justin Trudeau's masculinity. And this is a really tough topic for men. But you see, people call him by a female name, Justine, or they make aspersions about him. And what you're really telling us there is that the lessers, the people who are less than, are female or in a minority. And, we see this in the US as well, this masculinity trope. They did an ad about Justin Trudeau that Getty's in Maclean's describes as using fairy script. And they advertised it during really highly watched sports shows.
Angry men were the target.
Exactly. So this is not new. But what's new right now is that the heat that was going on in the United States, which has been somewhat deflated by the change of a candidate there, it's still going on here. And to bring it back home, the insults that were being slung at Mr. Singh and other MPs coincidentally sound an awful lot like Conservative talking points. And at some point, I've said
by the protesters, you mean?
The protesters.
Yeah.
If, it's really easy to build a fire, it's really hard to control one. And if this turns on you, you have no one to blame but yourself.
So Fred, on this, right, look, I ask this question about what are the Conservatives doing? I will be criticized because I'm bought and paid for because I work for the CBC, right? Same with what they're doing with CTV. If a nurse disagrees with them on safe supply, they are attacked as an out-of-touch elite. Like, anyone who disagrees is either compromised, a liar, a fraud, self-interested, or unethical. If they form government, as the poll suggests, they're going to have to work with some of these people at some point, right? Like, how do you do this kind of scorched earth rhetorical campaign politically and then function after the election should you get what you want?
Look, I don't think it's scorched earth at all. I think if you go back in a lot of our elections, there's aggressive language always used by other parties.
But this is not an election. This is every day. Every minute of every day.
We are in a minority parliament that's got an expiry date that's quickly approaching. So I'd say we are. Go back, I remember my first national campaign I worked on, I remember the Liberals had an ad with a gun going off in people's face, saying that the Conservatives were going to bring
guns in our streets and all that kind of stuff.
Guns in our streets are going to bring in aircraft carriers and a ban abortion, something Harper's government clearly never did. So this retort, it's not new. What we have now is social media and videos and things we're seeing, and it's bringing people to Parliament Hill to protest, to make these clips now that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Right.
But we talked about the mood of Parliament earlier. Yeah. It's the mood of the country. People are angry. People are hurting right now. There's a lot of people struggling at a level that haven't felt in a very, very long time. And now they have the tools to communicate that didn't exist a number of years ago.
Right. And like, Mel, I know the back and forth of demonizing your political opponent isn't new. But a nurse who believes in harm reduction, a doctor who runs a clinic, being called a liar and demanding her medical license be revoked, that's new.
Right.
That's an escalation. That's a change, is it not?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a change. It's also, to your point earlier, the constant of tearing it all down, the constant of, it's not just meeting people where they're at. It's not recognizing their anger and hearing them out and saying, here are the things that we're going to do to make it better. It really is inflaming that anger. And that only serves partisan interests. And I know, we're in politics, that's what politics is.
Yep.
But it at a certain point, you are so far down the road. How do you come back from that? And how do you not see people start turning around and being upset with their neighbors instead of just being upset with, elected officials who are the ones making the decisions? So I do think it's dangerous, and I do think it's not just, your nurses, it's any association that says anything nice about the government. It's, well, they're not legitimate, they're not. So eventually, if we want to make things better in this country, you're going to have to work with the people who actually know what they're doing on these subjects. And if you don't agree with me, get out of the way is not going to fix anything, is actually just going to make things worse.
So Fred, on this, one issue where people don't agree with the Conservative leadership now is the confidence votes that you're trying to do. They've got their motion. This is what you wanted to highlight. It's very simple. It's very clear. And everybody's rejected it, unless the Liberals decide to vote themselves down. I mean, what do you want to talk about?
Maybe a number of MPs will.
They just might, yeah. Let's see how that one goes.
Maybe others will.
Is Ken McDonald in Ottawa next week?
We'll have a Ken watch, see how he votes. Look, this was we clearly saw this coming. Jagmeet Singh tore up the SACA agreement without a real reason 2 weeks ago, which maybe it was because of the by-elections. It feels like it now when the next, as soon as the motion comes forward, he backs off immediately and says he's not going to support the government without negotiating. I don't understand why he pulled out of the agreement to just vote confidence for this. Like, why pull out then? It absolutely makes no sense then. And then last week when he then tore up his party's belief in or pledge on the carbon tax. It's this weird. I don't know what Jagmeet Singh or the NDP are doing right now. I feel they're flailing. And for Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives to come out with a very clear and concise motion on what they're going to do, any party, if you truly didn't believe in the Liberals, and for Jagmeet Singh to say, we don't want the Conservatives, but he said the Liberals are finished. Their time is up, and but apparently it's not. He's going to keep them alive.
Right, but okay, it's power and politics, as you like to remind me, right? The politics for the NDP and the Bloc is if they want to get stuff, this is the parliament for them.
Yeah,
because the parliament that could come back if they do give Mr. Poilievre what they want, they're not going to get anything.
Fully agree, and we see the Bloc Québécois going out there with their demands and all that. The NDP actually had a deal with the Liberals that they just walked away from. So I don't understand why they didn't sit down at this stage. Hey, Poilievre is bringing a non-confidence. We have this agreement. Let's sit down and we want to add this and we want these more things out of it. They didn't do that. So they're playing this weird, hypocritical game.
Okay, I want to go to Greg first because I know Mel's going to have some thoughts on
so
this.
Many thoughts.
So many thoughts. This is Oppo Day 1 for the Conservatives. They're going to get, I think, 5, as what Peter Julian told me, between now and Christmas. The holiday season. Christmas for me. I don't know, as Mr. Blanchette said, if they don't get it by the middle of October, no one's going to vote in November, December to cause an election because of the holidays and what that would mean. I mean, what do you think of the immediate refusal of anybody to sign on with the Conservatives this week?
Well, and the Conservative leader worked so hard to build alliances with other, right? Who's surprised? I mean, again, this is where things kind of come home to roost for the Conservatives on this. They don't have an ally on this. To Fred's point about ripping up the deal, I think it might be as basic as it helped them keep the Winnipeg by-election, Elmwood Transcona. But I think on the carbon pricing, and the Bloc leader said the same, the environment's a very important issue in Quebec. And the Conservatives are not doing overly well as compared to the rest of the country. And so that may have actually aided the Bloc there. A really smart person I saw on your show this week, it might have been you, pointed out the fact that by ripping up the deal, though, it really nullifies the pension talking point that the Conservatives
if he wanted his pension, he would have kept it alive
Now,
because it gets him vested, right?
That's from a logical point of view, it would nullify it, but they don't deal in logic, so they continue to use it. I think on a case-by-case basis, I do think, if it does come out that this is why the timing, because I struggle like Fred with why Singh timed those, ending the deal, his comments on carbon pricing at that time. Was it by-election related? That's really the only thing I can come up with.
There's no way he could come back to this session of Parliament with the Liberals under the illusion they had a supply and confidence partner running its course. Just to be fair to the partner and be fair to the country, they had to tell them. didn't they? That the way we've operated, we're not going to do this when we're back to work on the 16th of September.
But we've said before, I mean, you're explaining it. Fred and I are trying to find reasons for it.
Okay.
It would have been nice to hear from the NDP leader why.
So, yes, okay. So, Mel, on that, I know you have lots of thoughts on what Fred is saying about the thing. What struck me is very interesting. Singh went viral and clearly has gone viral as he's lost his voice as the week went on, as he's got some sort of a bug. But when he said, I'm not voting for the confidence motion, people were like, why can you do this? He's like, I'm not going to let him tell me what to do. Right. He just kind of dismissed Pierre Poilievre, who has set the agenda politically for 2 years now. I thought it was an interesting moment, I thought. What do you make of where that is?
Yeah, despite the frog he had in his throat, I thought that press conference was actually quite strong. I think compared to the last 2 weeks where, you know, when asked questions, he like falters a little bit. I thought that he was strong in this one, and this is what we're doing, and, you know, you can like my answer or you can't like my answer, but like this is what our path is forward. And I like, the interesting thing for the NDP is they have to distance themselves from Liberals, but they can't get closer to the Conservatives, right? Like that is not a win for them either, because they've got.
We're moving your chairs slightly apart each week, you and Greg, but not getting you any closer to Fred, all right?
Further away.
Just so you know, exactly.
But that's important, right? Because they're going to get attacks from the Liberals, and they already have. Like, oh, they're just giving a win to the Conservatives. So that two game of like, we're not going to listen to this guy. We think he's out of touch and he's only in it for himself. That is also important. So I actually, I liked that press conference. I liked what he had to say on that. I thought he was strong in that, despite the.
Yeah, I know. I mean, look, listen, man, it was like the worst time to get a cold, right? But you know, they did this to get unshackled from the Liberals, but it also unshackled the Liberals from the NDP, and that's where the return fire is coming from in a way that we haven't seen for a while. But Fred, it's interesting because like Poilievre and the Conservatives have set the agenda in question period nonstop, like often through procedural tactics and I say stunts, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but you know, just finding a way to use the procedures to control things. They tried it with this, and people are just dismissing them. It's interesting to see a far more aggressive and consistent attack back at the Conservatives, especially from the Liberals and the other opposition parties. It's a different dynamic.
It certainly is, and that's the true minority parliament, the stage we're currently at, where we haven't had in all of the, you know, this is our second parliament in a row that's a minority, but the other ones, you know, there was a pandemic, and now we had the SACA. Now that it's gone, it is a true minority now, where people are going to be firing all different directions, just like we did back in the, you know, we were in a minority from 2004 to 2011, and it feels like that again. And it's a different dynamic for sure, and there's a lot of going back and forth. And someone mentioned earlier about, I think you mentioned about how the NDP may not bring down the government closer to Christmas. Like in 2006, it was November, they brought the Liberals down. We had that.
I remember.
Such a good time.
January, it was an excellent time.
Paging the RCMP.
January 23.
Be flying around the country.
Was awesome. We got a minority conservative government out of that.
But Fred, does it feel to you like the other parties finally woke up and realized the Conservatives are the front runners in this whole thing, and that it's not just Justin Trudeau you got to put the boots to every day? You maybe got to look at the guy who all the polls suggest is going to win it if it happens now?
Yeah, maybe they finally figured it out. Who's the competition? And it is the Conservatives. There's no question. We're getting closer and closer every few weeks or months to 50% in the polls. It's incredible where the Conservatives are right now because they've been aggressive. They've been pointing out there's a lot of anger out there, and they have been talking to that anger. They've been getting those people fired up and understanding that they believe they have the solutions to do it. The NDP have been, you know, when they're backing the Liberals for the last 2 years, and it is an opportunity for the NDP, and they obviously had to break the SACA agreement. It made political sense, but again, they didn't communicate why they did it, and I think that's where they made their error.
So one of the areas where they've been attacking the NDP and trying to make people angry, Mel, is this argument that Jagmeet Singh is only keeping this parliament alive to get to, February, when he qualifies for his pension, which will be worth $66,000 a year, starting at the age of 65. CBC took a look at pensions based on these allegations, and you can see that Mr. Poilievre gets a pension of $230,000 a year starting at 65. That will go up even higher if he becomes Prime Minister. Andrew Scheer is a similar situation as a Speaker and a long-serving MP. What do you make of this move? Because by tearing up the supply and confidence agreement, Jagmeet Singh put his pension on the line, because if Parliament goes down and he doesn't win a seat, he doesn't get it.
Right, and it's an interesting frame, because it's one that the NDP can fight back at. That story from the CBC, I thought that was brilliant, and I saw the video that the NDP put out today saying triple, 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 using Pierre Poilievre's words, and I was like, yeah, For sure. And I think the interesting part of that is I'm somebody who believes that everybody should have a pension and should be able to rely on those pensions. And when you're having the conversation with workers who are worried that Pierre Poilievre is going to cut their pension, it's a really interesting context to have those three things in the conversation. Because when Jagmeet is talking to workers, he's criticizing the fact that that's his only point of attack, but at the same time, Jagmeet is saying to workers, I believe you should have a pension. This is something that we believe in. This is something that we're fighting for. So it doesn't actually hurt the majority of the people that Jagmeet is talking to in the NDP's universe that they're trying to persuade to vote for them. It's like an interesting and similar parallel to dental care of, Pierre Poilievre has had dental care paid for by taxpayers for however many years he's been an MP, but was going to fight dental care for, children, seniors, and people who don't have dental care insurance. So the ability to say, I don't think it's a winning issue like Pierre Poilievre thinks it does, at least not in our new voters. Maybe it helps with folks that he's talking to directly.
Maybe for fundraising and engagement and these sorts of things, right?
For folks that are already with him, maybe, but for our folks, it's like, perfect. Let's talk. You want to talk about pensions? You want to talk about what Pierre Poilievre is going to do to your pension? Let's talk about it. So it's actually quite a winning thing to be talking about for the NDP.
Greg, there was a fundraising email from the Conservatives, calling Jagmeet, by the way, not Jagmeet Singh, a liar, a fraud, a phony. He's only keeping the government up to get his pension and these things. If you're going after that, but you're not answering questions on what you're going to do with dental care, and then your own pension and your own entitlements roll into the spotlight, I mean, is there a risk there in sort of making these issues an issue when they can be flipped back?
Well, I was struck, I think it was on Monday, the Conservative finance critic brought it up in question period. And I was instantly struck by the fact that the individual asking the question will also qualify for a pension. So if you're so anti-pension, then you should in the same breath say, I'm not going to be taking mine. If I'm going to criticize the NDP leader for qualifying for one, mine will go to charity or something else. And of course, they're not going to do that. I believe in pensions for politicians if they've served, it's 2 elections, 6 years. If we truly want good people in politics, sometimes there was a documentary in the early 90s after the wipeout of the PC party and how some of those members of parliament struggled to find work. There was, I believe, if I remember the documentary correctly, there was a politician, I don't believe federally, but had committed suicide because they were tarred as a partisan and their tide had gone out and they couldn't find employment. So I think if we're going to ask people, we ask a lot of our elected officials. We just talked about the harassment and how it's elevated. But some of them, I remember from Northern BC, he's a provincial cabinet minister now, Nathan Cullen. When I worked for Belinda Stronach and she was talking to him about how long it took him to get to his riding. So I do think that there's a place for pensions if they earn it. But I think, for you to criticize somebody else for taking their pension when you're in full intentions of taking yours, it's pretty ridiculous.
I will confess, and I say this in no judgment, I was shocked the pensions got up to $230,000, $240,000, $250,000 a year. I knew they were generous, and I understand the reason being because of the downside of being a politician and how it can hurt you, especially in small places. But I was surprised it was so big, and now it's been thrown back at Mr. Poilievre just by putting factual information out into the public domain.
Right. The big difference is here, we're talking about pensions, and all parliamentarians who serve 6 years should get one. With Jagmeet Singh not saying why he's keeping this government alive, other than on February, he now qualifies for his pension. So it's a fair question to ask. It's a fair point to make. And when you're talking about Mr. Poilievre voted no confidence in governments about a dozen times before he got his pension, before he qualified for his pension. So it's not
How old was the Conservative leader when he qualified for his pension? 31.
Yeah?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's pretty rich.
We're asking Jagmeet. It's a fair statement to make when Jagmeet won't say why he's keeping the government alive. To point out, is it because of your pension? It's a fair comment to make.
I don't actually think it's fair, but I think there's lots of other things that if the Conservative Party is so concerned about, axing the tax and inflation, they're doing this because they're trying to kick the crap out of the NDP leader, pure and simple. I don't know if that's fair. Maybe it's by the rules, but I don't think it really is all that enticing to get people into politics. The Toronto Star reported when Doug Ford jumped on this bandwagon, he got backlash in his own caucus because since Mike Harris, there has not been provincial pensions, and that's a bone of contention for provincial politicians in Ontario.
All right, quick last word on that, and then Mel, and then we got to say goodbye for the week.
Oh, again, I just think it's important to note that it's not a hypocritical statement for Poilievre to do this.
Maybe not.
He qualified for his pension after voting over a dozen times to call an election back in the minority days when he was first elected.
Okay, maybe it's not hypocritical, Mel, but is it fair, especially to call someone a sellout, right? I mean, going back to where this whole conversation started, that's a being called a sellout is quite a thing.
It's also not very prime ministerial, and I think people are going to start paying attention to that. I just think it's...
We'll see.
Yeah, well,
Politics has gotten in a whole different place, right? Trump was president.
I have faith. I have hope. But what I was going to say is I just think it's a silly strategy of like highlighting the issue of pensions, because every time you're going to go to Union Hall, which is a group of voters that Pierre Poilievre really wants to win, you're going to have to ask the question, well, what are you going to do with our pensions? What are you doing with all of that?
But if that's the question, I'm keeping this government alive because I want to get my pension in February, I think is that Canadians
I don't think a lot of people are actually asking that question.
But that's the
if they're not a conservative,
if that's the view where people
if they're not the leader of the
like,
Conservative Party. But again, if you're going to ask that, then don't take your own pension. Simple.
It's not about
but then it would be really fair for him.
He took a risk at it.
Don't you think it'd be fair if I'm going to question you and your pension, and I'm going to say I'm disavowing mine, then that's fair.
He's not disavowing it. He's saying he's keeping this government alive so he can qualify.
It's not a question of entitlement. It's a question of motivation, right? That, yes, you're entitled to it, but you're only keeping this alive so you can get it. But that implies that he's in politics only for those reasons.
Yeah,
and there's a whole bunch of things.
Conservatives have to do is
for a reason. He can come out and say why he's keeping this government alive.
All the Conservatives need to do is
tell us.
is get more votes.
Okay, I have to stop this, or we'll keep going until February, and it'll be a mood issue. But it's always fun, gang. Fred Delory, Craig McEachern, and Melanie Richer. And lots